Pro-Life Matters. I'm your host, Brendan O'Connell. Today's show revisits with a guest who was last on Life Matters in March of 2008. His involvement in a nationwide pro-life project called 40 Days for Life has blossomed into a worldwide movement that has had much measurable success. 40 Days for Life began to expand nationwide in the fall of 2007. So what has this grassroots group accomplished, and why is their effort even necessary? Have babies been saved or mothers spared the emotional and psychological pains of post-abortion trauma? And have abortion providers and workers been affected? And exactly why has this effort been successful? Today's guest will answer these questions and provide his perspicacious insights. I confidently believe you'll find today's show to be unique, informative, content-rich, truthful, and thought-provoking. Today's guest was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He was conferred a degree in biomedical science at Texas A&M University. He spent 11 years in professional sales and marketing in the pharmaceutical industry. Formerly, he was the executive director of American Life League and national director of its STOP project. Currently, he serves as national campaign director of 40 Days for Life. He's married and resides in Virginia with his beautiful wife and 2 children. Well, welcome to our guest, David Bereit.
Well, Brendan, thank you so very much for having me, and I have to say, I think this is the first time I have ever been described as having perspicacious insight, so thank you for using such a great word. I'm going to have to look it up in the dictionary afterwards.
Okay. David, could you briefly discuss first 40 Days for Life back when you were involved, I guess since the beginning, at College Station, Texas, where your alma mater is?
Absolutely. Well, I used to live in that town of College Station, Texas, the home of Texas A&M University, and years ago, a Planned Parenthood provider came to town to begin performing abortions. That was in 1998. They announced it, and they opened their doors in 1999. And the community was right there in the middle of the Bible Belt, initially in an uproar and trying to do everything they could to stop the building from opening, but unfortunately it did. And then it shifted focus. The community formed a local group called the Coalition for Life to try to stop Planned Parenthood. And over the years, people just got really weary. And by 2004, it seemed like many of the pro-life people in the community had just become tired. They were going back about their busy lives. Pulpits were falling silent on the topic of abortion. And 4 of us, myself, a young couple named Sean and Mary Lisa Carney, and a young woman named Emily, said, we've got to do something about this, but we don't know what to do. And so for 1 hour, we decided to pray and ask God what we should do. And around an old wooden table, we did pray for 1 hour. And during that time, God put on our hearts the vision of what became 40 Days for Life, a 40-day program, because we know that throughout biblical history, God uses 40-day periods to bring about transformation, and 3 activities that we felt we needed to do during that 40-day time frame. Number 1 was prayer and fasting, because we know ending abortion, with man this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible, even turning the tide against this injustice in our country and in our communities. So prayer and fasting because we know some demons can only be driven out through prayer and fasting. The second thing that we felt we needed to do was a constant prayer vigil outside of the Planned Parenthood abortion facility that had brought this deadly legacy to our community. 24 hours a day for 40 days, being there as a witness to the injustice of what was happening inside and offering hope and help to the mothers about to go into that facility to help prevent them from making a decision that they would have a lifetime of regrets about. And third and finally, we felt that we needed for 40 days to involve ourselves in community outreach, spreading the word about the injustice of abortion, but also inviting people to be a part of the solution to this crisis. And so those 3 ideas, prayer and fasting, peaceful vigil, community outreach, all around a 40-day time frame, that became the vision of 40 Days for Life, that 2 weeks later, we kicked off the first ever 40 Days for Life campaign. And it was absolutely amazing. We saw over 1,000 people get involved in that inaugural effort, and that year abortions reduced by 28% in that community. And still to this day, that community, years and years later, after that first 40 Days for Life, is continuing to bear fruit. One of the examples that many people are aware of is the director of that Planned Parenthood facility, who actually worked through 6 of these 40 Days for Life campaigns outside her doors, Abby Johnson. During 2009, during a 40 Days for Life, witnessed an abortion by ultrasound, and that began her conversion journey to leave the abortion industry and to go through healing herself and then become a prominent pro-life advocate. And Brendan, I am so excited to be on your show right now just to relate that not only did that first campaign save lives, not only have there been many more lives saved in that community since then, not only did Abby Johnson experience conversion, but last week, 1 week ago today, After 15 years of community efforts, 9 years after that first 40 Days for Life campaign happened there, I was in front of that Planned Parenthood Abortion Center on the day it went out of business for good. So it is continuing to bear fruits in that community even to this very day.
Well, that's fantastic news. My goodness, Texas is just replete with good news lately. Now, I was going to ask you one thing about the getting community outreach. How do you involve the community? Do you go door to door, or how do you get them to be aware of what's going on?
Well, in that initial community, that was the option we took, was to go door to door. And we had a team of college students that literally went to the 35,000 permanent households. They went to the dorms. They went all over the college campus inviting people to be involved. Obviously, as 40 Days for Life has now begun to spread, and it started from that one community and has since spread to 501 cities across all 50 American states, 19 other countries. 500,000 people have participated, and in some cities like Boston, it's going to be a very different campaign than in a little town in the middle of the Bible Belt. And so community outreach can take on different forms. It can be speaking to the media. It can be going and speaking in churches and schools. It can be door-to-door outreach as well, but doing everything we can to make sure that people are aware that lives are being lost, that women are being wounded, but also so they know they can do something to be a part of the solution to that.
I see. And how is it that so many folks have become involved? It's remarkable to me to see. I mean, I've watched over the last 5 or 6 years, or whatever it is, since we had first spoken. Are they coming from the heart? Is it God touching them?
You know, it's a great question. It's something I don't fully have the answer, but I'll tell you my thoughts. I think for a lot of people, this year we experienced a very tragic landmark year because this is the 40th anniversary of the Roe versus Wade Supreme Court decision. There are many people who feel the pain. Maybe they've experienced abortion themselves and they know what a tragedy it is. Maybe they have a family member, a loved one. Maybe they're a young person who knows that 1/3 of their generation, born after 1973, was aborted. Many people feel the pain of abortion and they want to do something about it. But historically, most of what we could tell them to do is, well, vote once every 4 years for the right president, vote for the right people in Congress, vote for the right people, or vote to pass a law, or send your money to Washington, D.C., or to the state capitol, and we'll try to take care of the problem for you. And many people wanted to do something more than that. Certainly we have pregnancy centers, certainly we have advocacy groups, but it gave people something concrete they could do in their community to be a part of changing hearts and minds and saving lives. The other thing that I think for many people really resonated is it was a spiritual effort first. We recognize that we can't do this on our own, but I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And by building this campaign first and foremost on prayer and fasting, and then allowing those graces that come through that to flow through us into our other efforts, that, I believe, is what has brought about so many of the amazing results. So to date, we have records of over 575,000 people who have participated in 40 Days for Life campaigns. I could never have imagined that when we were standing out in front of one abortion facility in little Bryan, College Station, Texas back in 2004, but that's what God has done. It's spread all around the United States. I've been to Australia and seen the campaigns all across that country, Spain, France, England, Poland, the Republic of Georgia, Nigeria, South Africa, and most recently, this past spring, we had the first ever 40 Days for Life campaign right in the heart of Moscow, Russia. So clearly, this is resonating with people all around the world who want to do something to make a difference.
I see. Now, I noticed one of your statistics, it was amazing to me that the number of congregations that have participated.
Right.
Here in the Northeast, we have a heavier Catholic population, although I don't know if I don't know how many go to church weekly, but 16,000 congregations. That's phenomenal. Is that where you generate a lot of your people that come?
Absolutely. And typically what happens in a given community is one person or a small group of people feel led to bring 40 Days for Life to the area. So let's say it's Rita Rousseau there in Boston, and she signs up to lead a 40 Days for Life campaign. And then what typically happens is she'll form a team, she'll recruit other people to be a part of that team to organize the campaign, and then they'll begin reaching out to different congregations. Now, they may reach out to a diocese, an archdiocese, they may reach out to Protestant congregations, evangelical churches, and some of those churches will be actively involved, and some of them will not. And many times what we find of the 16,000 plus congregations that have participated in 40 Days for Life, sometimes the congregation has led first, and then the pastor has come along. And I was raised in a church denomination where frequently that would be the case. People would get involved in doing something good, and then the clergy would see that happening and say, oh, maybe we need to get on board with the good things that are happening here. So I know sometimes we all want the leadership of our church or of our faith tradition to be the ones to take charge and to do things. And yes, it's a blessing when they do. But at the same point, when we talk about the church, my wife was in a Bible study one day, Brendan, and some women were sitting around talking with her and said, the church should do this, the church should do that. She looked at them and she said, well, we're the church, then we should do that. And that's the reality. The church is us, the body of Christ. And if things need to be done right in our community, then we need to do it. Some members of the clergy will come along. Some leaders of denominations will come along. Some will not. But we need to do what's right anyway because we are the church. And when we take that step of faith, we will invite other people sitting next to us in our pews, other people in our neighborhoods, other people who have their children in the same schools that we have our children in, and that is where we start to see the groundswell build and build and build. And then, sometimes later, we'll see leaders of various different faith traditions and denominations and churches come along as well. But, we can't wait. We have to do what needs to be done now because children are slated to die right now in our communities. We have to act. We have to be the church.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's a great thought, I think. Can I ask you, how many abortion facilities have been impacted or closed down, or any idea of those numbers?
Well, we do. We actually have been blessed. The number is 38. We actually just learned of a 39th that is probably about to close, but the 38th was the one I mentioned last week in College Station, Texas, outside of which 40 Days for Life began. And if you had ever told us, when we did the first 40 Days for Life, we were praying for God to close down that one facility, but we never even probably believed that it would happen. Excuse me. But we also never imagined how many other facilities would close. And we have now seen Planned Parenthood centers, independent abortion facilities that have closed their doors in numerous different states and numerous different locations, and we just give God all the glory for that. I'll give you an example. There was one in Pensacola, Florida. This is just beautiful the way that God works. There's a 40 Days for Life going on outside of this abortion facility, and unbeknownst to the people praying outside, on day 38, their prayers were answered, and the abortionist abruptly closed up his business, abandoned the practice, and left. They didn't even know that. They kept praying on day 39, on day 40, and on day 40 they had a closing celebration, praying for God to close down this place outside of a facility they didn't even know was already out of business. And these are the kind of beautiful stories we see time and time again through the faithfulness of God's people, through God Almighty's intervention, and many times through circumstances that collide with this, be it legislative initiatives, be it educational efforts, be it the effectiveness of pregnancy centers. All of these things working in concert bring about amazing victories. So that's the number of abortion facilities we've closed. And if I can even shift to one other thing, too, we are aware of, just to date, and this has now been going on as a nationally coordinated and internationally coordinated effort for 6 years, we are aware of 7,536 babies who were scheduled for abortions at these facilities whose mothers changed their mind and chose life instead. Now, those are just the ones we know about that we've been able to confirm. There are probably many more. But when you think about 7,536 children who are alive today, some of them will be doctors, some of them will be athletes, some of them will be teachers, some of them will be maybe even politicians, hopefully good ones. We have no idea what these children will do, but they are alive because people said yes to God's call to speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. And that's the kind of thing that can happen when we seek God's will and follow His will in rescuing those who are led to the slaughter. We have an opportunity to literally shape the course of history for America.
Wow. Now, just in looking at our situation here in Boston, and I know it's geographic, we've got a situation where the Archdiocese doesn't seem to even return Rita Russo's mail or calls, and the Knights of Columbus says, well, whatever the Archdiocese do, we'll follow them. Do you find this situation in other places around the country? Are the Knights of Columbus non-responsive to 40 Days for Life, or are they responsive? Or can you give us a flavor of what's going on around the country in that regard?
You bet, and I appreciate that question, because certainly in different areas we've had people who are frustrated that why aren't groups that should be involved more actively involved, and I feel that pain. To be fair, the Knights of Columbus have been phenomenal in most places around the country. In fact, the man who suggested to me the crazy idea of being out in front of an abortion facility 24 hours a day was a young Knight of Columbus. His name was David Araby, and he was the one who led our night shift. They called it the night shift with a K in front of it because it was Knights of Columbus who were out there all night long at the vigil at that first ever 40 Days for Life. They got recognized as the National College Council of the Year that year for their efforts. And we've seen Knights involved all over the country, and I know many of the leaders of the National Knights of Columbus, and they're wonderful people. And the Knights have done as much or more than almost any other organization to promote the pro-life cause, and 40 Days for Life probably would not be anywhere near what it is today were it not for the Knights. Now, with that said, in a given diocese, and I'll address that, and then I'll go back to the question of the Archdiocese, in a given diocese, there may be different people who may not be aware of the Knights' involvement in other places around the country if their experience is primarily within their local archdiocese. And what I would encourage in those cases is to point those Knights to the two big articles, feature articles in the Columbia magazine that have been run about 40 Days for Life and that spotlight the Knights of Columbus involvement. Or we have a video online, and if you go to 40daysforlife.com website and do a search, you can find there's a video we called 40 Days and Nights with a K, and it was a speech that I gave to a state Knight of Columbus convention in Indiana talking about all of the collaboration between the Knights and 40 Days for Life. So a lot of times it's just helping to make them aware of the involvement of the Knights elsewhere. They may just be a little bit weird, unsure of the organization 40 Days for Life. Who are these people, and is this something that's a fit for the Knights? And the answer is yes. It's a wonderful fit, and the Knights have been instrumental in saving thousands of those lives around the country. When it comes to the Archdiocese, I do know that you are in a challenging situation in Boston based on history of events that have happened there where people who claim to be against abortion did terrible things, and as a result it created a lot of tension and a lot of difficulty for people to know, are pro-lifers truly pro-life, meaning that they want to protect all life, or would they resort to violence to try to stop abortion? And so you have certainly hesitation there on some parties. And what I would do in that case is, number one, pray for those who are in leadership positions to understand, what opportunities exist, what new approaches there are, the compassionate nature they have. I remember early on when I just was getting started with 40 Days for Life, I had an opportunity to speak there in Boston, and Cardinal O'Malley spoke at the same event, and we had a chance to visit, and he blogged about me and 40 Days for Life afterwards. And so there's definitely at least an awareness, but helping them to see other dioceses, Baltimore or in Florida, in Sarasota, Florida, there are many, many dioceses that actually sponsor 40 Days for Life campaigns, which we don't encourage that or discourage it, but many of the dioceses have found this is a beautiful way to live out our pro-life commitment in a faith-filled way that doesn't conflict with the magisterium of the church or the compassionate approach that our diocese is taking. So certainly it's an ongoing educational effort, it's a prayer effort, but also helping the leaders of the diocese and the archdiocese to see there are other dioceses that have been hugely influential. One of my heroes is now Archbishop Samuel Aquila out in Denver, and I got to know him as Bishop of Fargo, North Dakota. He was the first bishop to write a public letter endorsing 40 Days for Life, and he wrote the letter calling upon all the priests in his diocese, no matter how far they had to drive, to come in and spend a minimum of an hour in prayer during the 40 Days for Life outside of the last remaining abortion center in the state of North Dakota. And he said to them, I know some of you live 3 and 4 hours away, and you may be wondering, should I drive all that way just to come and pray for an hour? He said, number one, I'll be there with you, so tell me your hour. I'm going to be out there myself. So he led by example. And the other thing he said is, there are women in your community who will drive that same 3 or 4 hours to come have an abortion. The least we can do is we, as clergy, can be there to offer them spiritual support and help so that they don't fall prey to that tragic decision. And I'm putting words, I don't remember the exact wording of it, but it was beautiful. It got picked up by the Catholic media all over the place and got 40 Days for Life coverage on EWTN and a lot of other Catholic networks. So it really is a lot of times just helping people to see there's been a long history, a rich tradition of Catholic dioceses and archdioceses participating in 40 Days for Life, and again, recognizing the dynamics there in Boston, but also prayerfully educating those involved in the archdiocese and in the Knights that this is something that can really complement and really enhance the beautiful pro-life work they are already doing.
Uh-huh. Now, David, your organization, your reach around the globe, you must have some type of a system set up that you can train leaders.
We do.
What do you have going there? How can folks find out whether or not they want to get involved, and also do they want to be a leader in doing a 40 Days for Life?
Well, great question. I've spent the last few days working on this specific aspect, so I'm intimately familiar with it. When somebody decides they want to lead a 40 Days for Life, we do the campaigns twice a year. So our next one is coming up this September 25th through November 4th. And we go through an application period for somebody like Rita Rousseau, who we've mentioned, to apply and say, I want to lead a campaign in my city, in Boston. So then what happens is, as she recruits people to help her with her team, we have an online training area specifically for the leaders of local campaigns, where we've got 7 training modules. Each of those has a video, a workbook, and various different case studies and examples that take people through all the steps. We've learned now with 500 cities participating, we've learned the best practices of what works, as well as what to avoid to not mess up and make mistakes. And so we walk people through this training. We get on live conference calls with them, and we support them. We have 2 full-time people dedicated 100% to providing support for those local leaders participating in a campaign. So if somebody's thinking about, well, maybe I should lead a 40 Days for Life in a suburb of Boston or in another city, or maybe help Rita, they can go to the 40daysforlife.com website, sign up to get email updates, and then through that we let them know when the application periods are, or if they get involved in a local leadership team, then they can have access to the online training. But we're literally, as an organization, we don't even have a physical office. I'm right now sitting in a corner of my bedroom in my house. That is our international headquarters of 40 Days for Life. And so everything we do from a distance. So we do conference calls, we do webcasts, we do video training, and then we get on the road during a campaign, and we go out and visit as many of the locations as we can. And over the last 6 years, I've been to somewhere around 400 of the different cities visiting 40 Days for Life campaigns, and it's a rich blessing for me to meet the people like Rita who are pouring their hearts and their time and their talent, their treasure into doing this effort locally and seeing the amazing victories that God is accomplishing through them.
You know, when Rita did this in the winter, spring, I signed a document I had no idea, which says that you will not, you will. It's a prayerful activity, and it's a nonviolent activity. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because that, I think, sets the mood, the whole mood for the 40 Days for Life.
Absolutely. And that also, Brendan, I wanted to touch on is why a lot of other dioceses have felt very confident in being a part of 40 Days for Life, like Providence, Rhode Island, or Worcester, Mass., and others that have joined the 40 Days for Life effort very wholeheartedly, initially with a little hesitation, but then as they learn more about it. We ask all those who participate in 40 Days for Life to sign a statement of peace, and it's essentially a document saying, number one, they're going to be compassionate and Christ-like in all their interactions, they're going to be peaceful, they're going to abide by any law enforcement, because this is not an effort of civil disobedience, and we certainly don't want to do anything we do out of anger, out of hatred, out of violence, and there's been far too much of that. I mean, you know firsthand what it's like when one person does something really stupid and harmful, how much that can set the movement back for years. Thousands of children can die because somebody does something out of just anger. And instead, we feel it's important that all of us agree that we will be peaceful, we will be prayerful. And just like Martin Luther King and other great social reformers of the past, it's not enough to simply identify the problem of abortion, but we have to help people to realize there is a peaceful way that we can resolve this problem, that we can solve this problem, and that's what we encourage through 40 Days for Life.
I see. Well, David, our time's coming to a close, but I wanted to ask one final question, and that has to do with Abby Johnson's work in getting people out of the abortion business. Can you speak to that a little bit?
You bet. Well, once Abby went through her own conversion process, went through healing, and it was able to go through all that, was sued by Planned Parenthood, won her lawsuit, she eventually realized that what she had experienced in that one community was people who loved her out of the abortion business, people who prayed for her to get her out of the abortion business. And she wanted to make sure that every worker in the abortion industry had the same opportunity to leave, because she knew that many people that she used to have as colleagues wanted to get out. They were only doing it because it was a paycheck, it was a job, or maybe as a personal justification from a past abortion they had had. So Abby decided to start a ministry specifically aiding abortion workers out of the abortion industry. And with 40 Days for Life, we're very, very connected to this, because Abby is one of 83 workers that we have seen come out of abortion facilities directly due to 40 Days for Life efforts. So Abby set up a new ministry called And Then There Were None. And the vision is that there will be no more abortion workers, no more abortion clinics, and no more abortions. And then there were none. And I'm blessed to serve on the board of Abby's ministry now, and they have seen just in the year that they have been up and running as a charity, they have now seen 71 abortion workers that have come to them, received practical financial help, job training, and help to find another job, and they've been able to leave their jobs and begin healing as well. So Abby, again, to whom much is given, much is expected. Abby's taking her blessings, and she is now sharing that with so many others. And it's beautiful to see. We've seen many of them through 40 Days for Life, many of them through Abby's work, and I really believe that's the beginning of the exodus we're experiencing here in 2013. The abortion industry is going to implode upon itself. So lots of good things happening, lots of hope, and I really believe we're witnessing the beginning of the end of abortion.
And David, finally, your website, how can folks get in contact with you?
www.40daysforlife.com, and it's what you see on your screen, the number 40, days for, F-O-R, life.com, 40daysforlife.com. Sign up for the email updates, and we're excited to see what God has in store for this coming fall and beyond.
Well, thank you so much, David. In closing, we hope you learned a lot about 40 Days for Life efforts to fight against the abortion industry here in Massachusetts, the nation, and around the world. We hope and encourage you, our audience, to get involved in 40 Days for Life grassroots campaigns. Thanks for watching. I'm Brendan O'Connell, your friend for life. We'll see you next week.